Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this course preview event at Signum University. We are going to be talking about the 5 exciting classes on offer at Signum University in the fall term, which begins next week, Monday, 29th of August, and it runs for 12 weeks, but there is still time to sign up if you haven't done so already. My name is Gabriel Schenk, and I will be your host. And I am joined with a fantastic panel of teachers. We've got representatives from all of the 5 courses on offer. If you're not sure what the term offerings is all about, the main thing that this is for is the Masters in Language and Literature, but you don't need to do the whole Masters to take one of these courses. You can sign up as an auditor, which is cheaper. You can still take part in the discussions, access all the lectures, attend live lectures if your course has live lectures, or access the pre-recorded lecture archives for older courses that are running again, and have fun and learn with everyone else. But if you want to take this course for credit, you can do so through the master's degree or the diploma degree. And that means you have to do assignments as well, but it also means you get to have feedback and work on your craft with your teachers. So they're both excellent options. To find out more, please visit our website, signumuniversity.org, which has been recently redesigned. So you'll see that the MA and the diploma are now under a degree programs list in the menu. And auditing is in the non-degree programs list because it's a separate thing, but you are auditing courses that are in the MA. So I hope that's clear. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with us through our contact form. But let's crack on and talk about these amazing courses. We have 5 on offer this term. Usually we only have 4, so we're really spoiling you with an embarrassment of riches. And we have 2 live new courses, plus a live language course, plus 2 literature courses that are being repeated and will have live discussion sessions, but the lectures themselves are pre-recorded from when the course first ran. Let's start with one of our brand new courses, Dark Academia, lectured by the wonderful Dr. Amy H. Sturgis. Amy, great to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm very excited about this course too. Looking forward to talking about it.
Excellent. And I love your background. It's very dark academic.
Thank you very much.
So, I mean, before we go any further, can you just tell us what is dark academia?
A very good question. It's a term that's only been around for about a decade, actually, although if we look at the features of dark academia, we can see that it's been around for quite some time. But dark academia is a subgenre that actually plays very nicely with a lot of other genres. So you see works of fantasy, of science fiction, of mystery, all connected to dark academia. But dark academia works really cover a wide variety of works that are related to academia. So they include students, faculty members, campuses, and other sorts of research spaces like libraries and laboratories, that sort of thing. And the quest for knowledge is connected to dark academia in some way. These are all Gothic stories. That means they're rooted in setting, they're fascinated with secrets, they are connected to history, sometimes places history, entire land's history, sometimes an institution's history, and sometimes it's the protagonist's personal history. There is a mood to dark academia. That's where you get the dark part of dark academia. And this is often connected to issues of mortality, also with the idea of death and what death means, or desire for deathlessness and research, or discussions about how to avoid death. And most importantly, dark academia works are engaged in a project of critique about power systems. So the fact that many of the protagonists are coming from the outside, they are outsider points of view rather, seeing how systems work, everything from bullying all the way to systemic issues of inequality. There are questions of how, as we learn, we also discover our world and the stories we tell ourselves to understand the way that the world works. There's also a little thread of true crime connecting a lot of works of dark academia. Many of the works we're going to study and many of the works that are considered the foundational works of dark academia were inspired by disappearances, deaths, even murders. And I think dark academia reflects a way in which we have fictional storytelling that allows us to look at truths that are sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes ugly, and work through what they mean and how they can be faced head on. And the ultimate goal of dark academia, I think, is to make the world a better place by making academia a better place. But there's a lot of steps to go through to get there. So there's fascinating works to study that take us on a journey, asking some really big questions, ultimately about what it means to be human and to be learning about what it means to be human.
Well, that sounds absolutely amazing and so fascinating. I didn't realize that the term was quite recent. Has that term come out of like Instagram and stuff? Because I know that, you know, it's a sort of aesthetic as well, dark academia, isn't it? It's sort of like corduroy trousers, and it's basically how I dress, and dark stormy clouds and that sort of thing. Is that kind of related?
It is, and you're right. The whole book talk, TikTok, Instagram, Tumblr. These are the places that generated the term dark academia to begin with. And the aesthetic movement is sort of connected to the literature, whereas the aesthetic movement, in a sense, sort of glorifies aspects of academia, and particularly of nostalgic academia. Then the literature sort of flips that on its head and finds things to critique. Issues of exclusivity, for example, or issues of power imbalances and that kind of thing. So they're connected. There's some works that sit sort of on the axis between the aesthetics movement and the literary movement. And for example, Donna Tartt's The Secret History is one of those. And so we're also going to be talking in class about the aesthetic movement and why now, and why particularly since 2016 has the literature exploded, but also the aesthetic movement and everything from clothing to housewares and decorating and photography and all those other things too.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And you've got, I see you've got films on the reading list. So, you know, it's not just about text, although the majority of things are novels, right? Pretty much everything else. Yeah,
exactly. We're looking at fiction, we're looking at nonfiction as well. And then we're also looking at film. And we're really fortunate too. 3 of the authors of works that we're going to be studying will also be appearing for live Q&A sessions with the students. So Pater O'Gillian, the author of The Call, and Elizabeth Thomas, the author of Catherine House, and Rebecca Kwong, the author of Babel, will all be appearing with the students to do live Q&As.
I mean, that is incredible to have those, you know, the actual authors being able to speak. And this is the great thing about doing something that is really up to the minute. You know, it's the last 10 years. Babel has only just come out, you know, literally like today, pretty much. It's still got that new book smell. It's hot off the press. I'm glad you say Babel, by the way, because that's how I pronounce it. But Rebecca F. Kwong gave the talking lecture in Oxford recently, and I met her through that, and she pronounces it Babel, and she says Babel's the British way. So now I'm not sure which one's right, but however you want to say it, I think it's probably okay.
We discussed that over email, actually.
Oh,
and
really?
I confess to the fact that I was raised by Star Trek, and Star Trek pronounced it Babel.
That's good to know.
But she said that she is all for any pronunciation. And I think that's actually in the spirit of the book. So
absolutely, yeah, definitely. So yeah, amazing to have those authors being able to speak, and one of the advantages, as I say, of doing something that's recent, because unfortunately, you know, Gothic tradition, unfortunately, we can't, you know, dig up Edgar Allan Poe to speak. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
And appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. Fantastic. We've got a question from Matagorn. Would C.S. Lewis's That Hideous Strength be considered dark academia? I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Very interesting question. I had seen that discussed as dark academia. I think one of the great aspects of this flavor is that works can be many things, and we can see veins of dark academia in multiple works. And from my own knowledge, I would absolutely say that is engaged in the same conversation. Yes, that Lewis is tapping into a larger tradition that we're going to trace all the way back to 1818.
Oh, wow.
I definitely think I would absolutely, That Hideous Strength, put it on the list.
Excellent. Yeah, so I am reminded of one of your other courses, the Gothic Tradition, which is coming back next term as a kind of repeat course. And so you've already mentioned that there is some overlap, and this is a kind of subgenre of Gothic. Is that accurate to say? Or
that's definitely how I would put it, yes.
And like with that, I mean, by the end of that course, I was sort of seeing so many connections and thinking, like, things that are like 3,000-year-old texts, maybe they're Gothic. You can sort of like see those roots run deep. So it's fantastic to hear that might be the case, but that is the case with dark academia as well. Can you say a bit more about this reading list, because this is one of the big draws of this course, I think. How much fun was it finding this reading list, narrowing it down? What can you tell us about the choices you made?
It's fun now that it's done, but it was excruciating. I had a much longer list, and I went into this mindful of the time that the students have and trying to make it accessible. All of these works also, by the way, are available as ebooks and as audiobooks, and a couple of these are particularly good in audio form. But I had a wonderful time putting these together, thinking about the breadth and depth of the ideas we wanted to discuss. And so getting to go back to Shirley Jackson was important to me. And Hangs a Man is a remarkable text that doesn't get nearly enough attention, even now in a sort of Renaissance moment for Shirley Jackson studies. So I'm looking forward to starting with that as our beginning place. And following that, Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay brings up a lot of issues in terms of colonialism and place and the heritage of place and the foundations of institutions that carries through all the way to R.F. Kuang's novel. And so there are a lot of through lines here as well. And speaking of through lines, going back to Hangs a Man is connected to the same real life disappearance that also really informs Donna Tartt's The Secret History. So there's another through line in the class as well. But getting to choose works that represent different voices and different critiques of the, different systemic issues that come out in academia, and how academia serves as kind of a pressure cooker where a whole lot of worldwide, global issues get condensed into a kind of goldfish bowl where everyone feels that everything is watched and everything is so intense because you're there for a particularly short period of time, but it's going to be a transformative one. That's been a lot of fun. So being able to draw from different authors and think about the institutions that are represented, including Legendborn by Tracy Dion, a campus from Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina. Look at the connections between the authors and the institutions they're writing about. We also have a fantasy classic, winner of the Mythopoeic Society Award, for Elizabeth Hand's Waking the Moon, which is an amazing work of fantasy that I'm looking forward to talking about as well. Also connected to a real life campus and some pretty big issues. I could just go down the laundry list of works, but I'm particularly excited to be able to talk about Babel so quickly. As you pointed out, this is its week of publication, and see how these works across different decades are talking about the same thing, and are bringing up the same questions over and over again, and in some cases speaking back to earlier authors' answers. And inspiring new works in this new explosion now.
Fantastic. And I think I hear your pain about having to narrow down the list. I think everyone who's designed a course at Signum University has had that issue. And actually for me, for the King Arthur course, which I taught earlier this year, Legend Born by Tracy Dion was one of the ones I wanted to have in, but as much as it might not have seemed to the students, I was conscious of students' time because they were, there is a lot of reading in these courses, and that's English literature, it's work. But we do think about people's time, and we try to make it manageable. But Legend Born was just too much for that course, so I'm really, really pleased that it's in this course, because it is Arthurian as well as dark academic. So if you've done the King Arthur course, you'll see some things, some crossover there. And that's another great thing about these courses, is they do kind of overlap with each other. So yeah, very much, I could talk to you all day about dark academia. I think that was such a fantastic overview. But we should move on to our other exciting courses. But thank you so much, Dr. Sturgis, for all of that. And please let us know if you got any more questions. Please ask them in the chat. If you are joining us in the live Zoom session, if you're watching this later on YouTube, then leave a comment down below and we'll try and get a response to you as quickly as possible. And do be aware that whenever you're watching this, unless you're watching this months in advance, there is probably still time to sign up. I think it's week 2. I think you've got a couple of weeks from this point to register if you haven't done so already. And then you'll have to catch up with reading, but it is possible. And it is possible to audit past classes as well. We have an extensive course catalog. So do check out all those options on our website. But for now, let's move on to our second exciting course, and another new course on offer this term, Foundations in Critical Reading and Research, lectured by Dr. Faith Acker. Faith, what can you tell us about this course?
I am so excited about this course, Gabriel. I think this will be my third or second and a half lecture course at Signum, because I did half of a course with Professor Daley, who's also offering that one this semester. And this one is a real delight to me. I love my other courses too. You should totally take Shakespeare as well with Professor Daley, who is awesome. But the thing that makes me so excited about this class is that this has been a collaborative endeavor among a lot of the faculty for about 3 years now. When we decided that our old Foundations introductory course was no longer really meeting all of the needs of the students, and we set out in several faculty members to look at what we really needed to offer in a course. And so while I like to think of myself as the glue that's holding this course together, and if you find me obnoxious to listen to, you should not take this course, because I'm talking every week and giving at least one lecture every week. But I also have, I think at the moment, 14 guest lecturers rolling in at different times over the semester, and 4 of them are here with me today. So it is a rich collaboration between a whole lot of Signum's really wonderful and really exceptional faculty who have just buoyed me and made me excited about all of these topics all along. And so one of the things that I thought when I was designing the course is it's so easy to give a lecture on something like how to structure a paper. But the way that I structure a paper is probably not the same way that Professor Daley structures a paper, and is probably not the same way that a linguist structures a paper, and is probably not the same way that somebody in a different humanities discipline structures a paper. So a lot of those writing topics we're going to run as roundtables, and you'll get to hear from 4 different faculty members who will tell you what they suggest to their students and how they approach that in their own writing. And we'll be talking really collaboratively about the different ways that you might want to think about approaching your writing and practicing your writing and your research over the course of the semester. And so I'm excited because I think there will probably be some technical glitches in the early weeks of the class as we sort all this out. But I think in the process, you're going to get something that is not just one person lecturing and telling you how you should write papers, because that's not really useful at the graduate level. Instead, you're going to get a lot of different perspectives and different approaches you can take, and have opportunities to ask questions and finesse some of your writing process. And the other thing I want to say about this class is I think it is Signum's best value for money class, because I have fought and negotiated to have 2 hours of preceptor sessions every week, which currently none of the other literature classes have. So you're going to get some time to discuss the set readings and the secondary readings, but you'll also have time to work on your writing skills and to get feedback from your preceptor. Whether you are a credit student or a discussion auditor, you'll get that extra bonus. So 2 things that I think should make this course very appealing to you. I'm super excited about it. And we're reading really fun books. My reading list is a lot shorter than Professor Sturgis's, because we're going to be doing so much writing that I wanted to balance that out. But we're reading the Odyssey, we're reading Cinderella, we're reading The Princess Bride, we're reading some Gothic epics. Is that right, Nelson? Sorry, Professor Goering. We have this
Germanic poems.
Germanic poems, sorry. And we've got some Star Trek in there and a film at the end. So it's sort of this whole bundle of different genres and forms and styles all smashed into one. And I just think it's going to be so fun and exciting.
Yeah, I love that approach so much. I mean, we should say that for students admitted starting this term, fall 2022, you have to take this course at some point. You don't have to take it this term, right? But you have to take it at some point during your master's program, which sounds, like, anything you have to do always sounds bad. But the reason we're doing that is because it is just so useful. Like we need everyone to have a grounding in these kind of core ideas. Theory can be, is a bit of a, puts people off. And it's because it's been badly taught before. I think sometimes, they're thinking back to high school or undergrad, and it's just kind of read this theory and then we'll just, treat it like philosophy. Whereas in literature, we want to apply it all the time. So this is what you're doing. You're reading theory alongside texts, and that's really exciting. And also having all those different perspectives. So it's not prescriptive. It's not saying you have to write a paper this way. It's here are the different approaches.
Yes, and I will add to that this course was really developed, again, collaboratively with a lot of the faculty, and we spent some faculty meetings talking about what skills our students were lacking. So this course is especially for students who are coming into Signum with degrees in other fields. We have a lot of students at Signum who have a bachelor's or even a master's or sometimes even a doctorate in a field that's humanities adjacent or even not humanities at all. And so this is really a let's get up to speed with English literature and linguistics and some of those other really humanities fields where you might have these skills in another field, but you might not be entirely sure what the conventions are. So if you're a new student, I would encourage you to take this course as early as you can. It doesn't have to be this fall. It's going to come around, I think, almost every year. But if you can work it in early, it will probably give you a lot of skills and techniques that you can run into some of your other courses later on.
Yeah, and a super, super helpful course for people who are auditing as well, because, a lot of people, they love reading, but they don't necessarily know how to do a close reading or even what that is. And this course will guide you through that. But I think there'll be lots of things of interest to people of all different levels too. So we've got a fantastic question from Jeff, which is delightfully kind of opening possibly a can of worms about translations. Why the Fagles Odyssey translation, asks Jeff, as opposed to the recent acclaimed version by Emily Wilson? What was your thinking there with Fagles?
So a couple different reasons. One of the reasons that I've picked the Fagles, yes, so the same edition is used in Professor Swain's Myths and Legends. So if you are buying books for my course, you can use that one in particular in your other courses. And cost was a really huge factor. So Emily Wilson's edition is really new. And consequently, at the time when I was pricing books, it's very expensive. Also, consequently, because it was expensive at the time when I was pricing books, I wasn't able to afford a copy. And I actually only acquired one this summer when I was in Oxford. And my excellent friend, Professor Gabriel Schenk, actually gave me a copy. So the Emily Wilson is a wonderful edition. And if you can get it, you may find it really enriching to read it alongside the Fagles. They make some really different stylistic choices. For example, I think Emily Wilson always translates the word as servant. She always translated it as slave, and other editions have historically translated it as servant, which kind of neutralize some of the power dynamics in the Odyssey. So if you can get it, I would strongly recommend reading both or reading multiples. But I find the Fagles a really accessible student translation. It keeps the poetry and the meter in a really accessible way while still letting you read poetry. Some of the older translations have gone to prose, or even some more recent ones, and I think that loses a lot of the Odyssey. But it's not, I don't want to say it's not hard poetry. It's not going to be the easiest thing you have read for Signum, but it is definitely more accessible if you are new to reading epics or new to reading poetry, and I think it's really beautiful. Yes, and as Professor Swain is commenting, it is a lot cheaper. So so you should be able to get the Fagles for I think I priced the books for this course, and I think at the time when I priced them, if you bought all used editions, you could get them for around $40. And it's really just the Lewis and Tolkien that is spiking this course really high. Because they always cost a lot because they're super popular. So I really didn't want this course to be a financial burden on students here at Signum. And so that was one of the reasons. Lots of reasons. There are lots of great translations. And if you have access to a library that has a lot of translations, we are spending 4 weeks on the Odyssey. So if you don't want to go at our sort of meticulous plotting pace, you're welcome to get 4 translations and read a different translation every week. And you might, or even reading, like maybe 2 translations over the 4 weeks. There are a lot of different ways you could spread out your reading if you're excited about translations, or even just consulting a book that you really like in another version. So don't let that limit you, but that's the one I'll be lecturing from, and that's the one we'll be using for some of our assessments and our close readings and our class activities.
And what I love about this discussion is that this is a great example of the kinds of things you'll be covering in this course, presumably. We're not just talking about translations as, well, which one do you go for and that's it, but we're actually talking about differences and approaches and, the differences in word choice and stuff like that. That's kind of close reading, I suppose. If you're interested in that kind of thing, you too are interested in theory. You might just not realize you're interested in theory because you've been put off in the past. But I think this
Can I add one more thing about theory? That is that this is a really light theory course. So the course that this has sort of replaced within the Signum syllabus was a very heavy theory course with a lot of long lectures on theory. We're going to touch on 7 different literary theories over the course of this class, but they're going to be just little snippets to get you excited. If you find them exciting, you can go and read more, and I've given you some secondary readings, and we are hopeful that we'll have another literary theory course that will delve into them if you are really into literary theory. But this is designed as just an introduction. Here are some things that are going on. Here are different ways you can look at a text, but don't be anxious that if you're new to literary theory that I'm going to start speaking in high-fangled literary prose. This is going to be us exploring some beginnings of theory together in a very learning and basic environment.
I love the title for week 7. I'm a scholar, not a theorist. So no, this sounds fantastic. Best of all possible worlds. Really exciting and fun course, and incredibly useful. So thank you so much, Dr. Acker. And
Thank you, Gabriel. Oh, sorry, Professor Schenk.
well, you can call me Gabriel. And I look forward to joining that course in a small way as well, with one of the roundtable discussions with everyone else. We're describing this as the Avengers Assemble version of Signum courses. I love it.
I like to think of it as the Signum All-Stars.
Yes.
Not that the ones who aren't in it, some of them are not able to be in it because they're teaching other courses, for example. But it is a lot of all-stars.
Brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Faith. Let's move on to another exciting topic, Shakespeare and the Middle Ages, which was co-lectured by Faith Acker and Liam Daley. And Liam, you are the preceptor for this course this term. So what can you tell us about Shakespeare and the Middle Ages?
Right. Well, thanks for having me here. So, as you said, Professor Acker, who we just heard from, and I designed this course and taught this course. The lectures are from both of us. I'll be doing the preceptor sessions while Professor Acker is launching her new class this semester. I mean, we will be primarily reading works by William Shakespeare that are about medieval history or medieval literature in some way or another. The course is broken down by Shakespearean comedy and medieval literature, Shakespearean history play and medieval history, and Shakespearean tragedy and medieval legend. But as the eagle-eyed among you will have already spotted, those discrete categories broken down by the first editors of Shakespeare's plays after his death, comedy, history, and tragedy, they're relatively tidy. But the categories of literature, history, and legend are very blurry and bleed into one another. I would say one of the things that it makes me most excited. And just on structural notes, so we'll be reading, most weeks we'll be reading a Shakespeare play and a work of medieval literature or another early modern work about the Middle Ages, and then probably some secondary criticism as well. So it is pretty reading heavy, but what isn't? I think the thing that gets me, that I'm most excited to be teaching this, there's a lot of classes at Signum that are about where we read medieval literature, right? Where we read the old texts, Shakespeare, Anglo-Saxon, or not Shakespeare, Chaucer, Anglo-Saxon, all of the Germanic literature that we read, the literature from the long, long ago. And then there's a lot of classes at Signum where we read works of literary medievalism. Like, that was the long, long ago. This is now. How do we figure out what were the Middle Ages? What do they mean? What do they mean to us? How are we different from back then? And this class I really love teaching because it arguably does both, right? So you've got Shakespeare, who is, from our vantage point, part of the long, long ago, right? We're reading these 400-year-old plus texts that are very rooted in the soil specifically of Elizabethan and Jacobean England and reflect the concerns of that time. But then also, right at the beginning of this very freshly post-medieval moment, the term Middle Ages was about a generation old at the time that Shakespeare was writing, and we have all of the, within a generation or two, all of these huge social changes, the invention of the printing press, the shift from feudalism to modern bureaucratic government, the shift from Catholicism to Protestantism in England, and then back again. So in all of these Shakespeare plays, we're reading something that feels very current to me, is that all of these plays have this feeling of we've just crossed some kind of threshold. The old rules that we've been following for however long don't seem to apply anymore, but the new rules are not quite, we don't know them yet. So it's exciting and kind of terrifying and feels very relevant to now. Like, we've just it's this brave new world. What on earth are we to do with ourselves? So that's I'm happy to talk more about some of the specific texts we're looking at, or what other questions people have.
Well, that's just such a fantastic overview. Thank you so much, Professor Daley. And I've got one comment saying that they love your voice, and they think that, you know, they're like, why haven't I chosen this class? Because you've just got such a great voice. I know you could be on the radio. You have a fantastic voice, so I'm sure the lectures are fantastic to hear. And of course, you've got Professor Acker's dulcet tones as well, so that's another good thing. Can you tell us, Professor Daley, a bit more about the genesis of this course? Because it was fascinating hearing you talk about what you cover. There's so much in here, it touches on so many points, but what actually inspired you to take this approach in the first place? Was this kind of Signum saying, well, we've got to have a Shakespeare course, but because we're inventive, let's take a different approach and do something that is more interesting than just another Shakespeare course, and then you went down the Middle Ages, or was it a sort of different route that you took to end up with this topic?
Yes, that's a great question. And Faith, please feel free to chime in. I'd be very curious to know if your recollection of this is the same as mine. Professor Olson approached Professor Acker and myself and say, we would like you to do a Shakespeare course for Signum. And you both know a lot about Shakespeare. You know, Professor Acker, you just published your book, or were about to have published it at that point. It's published now. Anyway, so you both know about this. Come up with something. Like, what do you want to teach? You know, and I think we very quickly decided we don't want to just do. This is not going to be a Shakespeare survey, although in a way it is, because we are doing the three major food groups of comedy, tragedy, and history. But we don't want to do just a regular old Shakespeare survey. What can we do that would be interesting to us, that reflects our specialized knowledge within this specialization, and also would be of interest to Signum students? So we kicked around a lot of ideas. I think maybe Shakespeare in the classical world was one of them. Not coincidentally, when I was starting this, when we were coming up with this, I was just beginning a PhD in medieval and Renaissance literature, and I've now just finished my PhD specifically on plays from the Renaissance that talk about the Middle Ages. So I think that it was probably not. And I was like, but what am I really interested in? Yes, it turns out it was this. So I've been thinking about this a lot for the past 5 years. It's been very much on my brain. But Faith, does that square with your recollections of how we came up with this topic?
My memory is that we drafted 4 course proposals, or at least the general concept for 4 different courses, and then we thought about which one we thought would be best for Signum. And I remember we both wanted to do a course that was just King Lear, and then we thought that's really specific and maybe we should pick one of the more general ones. So when you get to King Lear week, that was probably the week that we had the most fun with as we were developing it. But yes, it developed a lot like that. Yeah, it was really fun, and I think developing a course collaboratively allowed us to put a lot of our own interests in, but also to bounce back and find connections that we maybe individually wouldn't have seen.
I had forgotten that one of our pitches was just on King Lear. I think we probably made the right decision not to do all 12. We easily could have filled those 12 weeks. And the most funny that the most tragic play is the one that we had the most fun talking about. But
that would make a great space module. King Lear. Yeah, so look out for that. But I'm just looking down this reading list. I can see so many links, like so many things that are so useful to other things as well. I mean, Tolkien was very influenced by Shakespeare. You've got, you do Machiavelli's The Prince. You've got the concept of the King's Two Bodies. You've got a bit of Chaucer in there. So it looks like another one of those really useful courses, even though it sounds quite niche. it's actually gonna, if you take this course, you'll make lots of connections with other courses, and it will be good grounding for a lot of stuff we do at Signum. So yeah, you've done well to, you know, to design this for a Signum audience. What are you most looking forward to in your teaching of this, Liam, this term?
I think I'm probably most excited to look back at some of the Shakespeare history plays. I think it is underappreciated that Shakespeare wrote a continuous 8-play cycle, like a story that took 8 plays to tell. I feel like that's an underappreciated in most, you know, undergraduate Shakespeare courses, that it's like the extended Marvel universe. So we're going to be reading 3.5 play, well, basically the first half of that 8-play cycle. We'll be reading 3 out of the 4 plays, and then glancing a little bit at the at one of the 3, because we don't have time to do all 4, but you probably don't really need to do all 4 to get that story arc.
And speaking of history, I have to ask you, as a fellow Arthurian scholar, I get asked this question sometimes, and I'm never able to give a brilliant answer because I'm not a Shakespeare scholar. Why didn't Shakespeare write about King Arthur, do you think?
That's a fantastic question. Why didn't Shakespeare? I mean, we wish he did.
Yeah.
Right. We wish that Shakespeare wrote about King Arthur. We wish that Milton wrote about King Arthur, and you know, famously that was his first idea for Paradise Lost, and then he decided to go with the Genesis story instead of the Arthur story. I honestly, there's only one play in all of Elizabethan England that is about King Arthur, and you know, Thomas Malory was really popular in print in the late Tudor period, his Morte Arthur, and he is not popular on stage.
Well, he hasn't survived on stage, because the speculation is that I think we actually do have titles of Arthurian. Again, this isn't my area, but my understanding is that there may be some lost King Arthur plays from the Elizabethan stage.
You're absolutely right. We have one surviving play that is about
which is that The Birth of Merlin?
All right, so we've got 2 surviving, like the Spanish Inquisition. We've got the Misfortunes of Arthur in the late
Misfortunes,
and we've got the Mirth of Merlin. Although Arthur's not in that, but of course it's Arthurian.
Yeah. And that was thought to be Shakespeare for a while, but again, it's kind of wishful thinking, isn't it?
Oh, right. Any play that you like, you kind of wish was written.
Exactly. He might have had something to do with it, but who knows? But Shakespeare's one of those, you know, he's almost like a legendary figure. He looms so large, especially in the UK, but also I think in America, you know, it's sort of, he is the great writer, but it's partly because we've sort of decided that greatness is Shakespearean. I mean, he is very good, but there's kind of like fascinating things thinking about Shakespeare as a lens as well, and as an idea. And that's certainly something it looks like you engage with in this course. So that sounds absolutely fascinating. I could happily just talk all day about each individual course, but we should move on. And Nelson, there's a Fun in Our Time episode on that, I believe. I didn't know that. I'll have to check that out. In Our Time is a fantastic podcast resource. It's a BBC Radio 4 radio show that has some really, really good episodes on various academic subjects. So do check that out if you haven't done so already. But now, speaking of Professor Goering, let's move on to Intro to Germanic Philology 1. This looks like such a fun, interesting, useful course. What can you tell us about it, Nelson?
Well, I guess I should maybe start with the title. So we've got Germanic and we've got Philology. So Philology, to start with that first, my favorite definition of philology is Roman Jakobson's called it the art of reading slowly, which is a great definition, but maybe not super practical. Way we'll be doing it in this class is basically, we're going to view it as the approach of language and culture through texts. So the language is really going to be the backbone and the common thread through this class. The language and the texts that are written in these languages, and then we'll use that to kind of explore historical contexts and cultures and literatures that are reflected in these texts as well. So which languages, which texts? That's where the Germanic comes in. So the Germanic language family is what we're speaking a representative of right now. English is a Germanic language. They're all languages that kind of come from this Proto-Germanic in the same way that Romance languages come from Latin. So a group of closely related languages, things like Old English and Old Norse and old forms of German, old forms of Dutch. Those are all kinds of things we'll be dealing with. And we're going to be looking in this class basically at the earlier stages of these languages. I think we don't stray too much past probably the year 1300 or so. Maybe we might creep a little bit past that occasionally, but mostly we're kind of before that period. And a lot of the stuff are going to be sort of before the year 1000. So it's sort of on the earlier end of these things when these languages are really quite close to one another and much more obviously related in a lot of ways. I do want to emphasize that there are no prerequisites. You don't have to know any of the old Germanic languages to take this class. We're assuming that you can deal with English like any class, but that's it. Well, everything else here we will introduce and present to you as with all the tools that you need to approach these things. If you've taken our Old English class or Old English somewhere else or Gothic or something like that, that's great too. You're perfectly welcome. There's a lot in here, even if you have that background, but you don't need it to do this class.
Fantastic.
Go
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, I was going to say it's basically a survey class in a lot of ways. So we're going to kind of do a survey of a lot of different languages, find out what makes them linguistically distinctive, find out what their historical cultural contexts are, and then do little tasters of the literatures in the text. So we'll take a look at a lot of little tiny short texts with a lot of help, in the original languages, a lot of glosses, a lot of notes, things, so we can actually get little tasters of these various languages in their original form, or as close to original as we can get these days. So you can see the whole range of everything from Beowulf to the Poetic Edda to the wonderful Gothic Bible translations, which may not sound wonderful as literature, but I have a Tolkien quote I want to say real quick, where he said of these that I discovered in it, not in Gothic, he's talking about not only modern historical philology, which appealed to the historical and scientific side, but for the first time the study of a language out of mere love. I mean, for the acute aesthetic pleasure derived from a language for its own sake, not only free from being useful, but free even from being the vehicle of literature. So if that kind of thing intrigues you and makes you excited, we'd love to have you come and join the philology class.
And I don't think there's any better feeling than having a text written in another language and spending time on it and being able to read even just a little bit of it in that language. And it's like nothing. It's so much better than a translation. You realize just how much better it is. Much slower, but so much more rewarding.
The art of reading slowly.
Yeah, exactly.
We do take that. It's a kind of a tongue-in-cheek translation, but we also do take it serious.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And this is taught with 2 one-hour lectures every week, which are pre-recorded, so you can access the archive, and 2 one-hour weekly discussion sessions, which is the way that language courses are taught. So you do have lots of assistance. You're not just sort of left to do it on your own, which would be very, very challenging indeed. What are you most looking forward to in this course, Nelson? Are there any weeks that stand out to you in particular?
Any weeks that stand out? I mean, actually, what I always really like about it, we've done this course a couple of times. What I always really like about it is because we're doing a little bit of Gothic, and I mean the old Germanic language Gothic, not the Gothic that we were talking about earlier. Very different things. We have a lot of terms, a lot of things under that term. A little bit of Old Norse, a little bit of Old English, a little bit of Old High German. I really like watching the students make their own connections and bring together things that I hadn't seen or I hadn't thought about. And I'm looking forward to doing it again and seeing what the new students what connections they can make, what I can learn from them. It's always a learning experience, always goes both ways.
Yeah, I absolutely know what you mean. That's what I always look forward to when I teach a course at Signum as well. And wouldn't it be wonderful if someone wrote a Gothic novel in Gothic? Don't know if it's ever been done before. Maybe if anyone can do it, it's a Signum University student. So
there's Alice in Wonderland. Someone has translated that into Gothic. I don't know if that counts as Gothic in the original. I think that'd be stretching it, wouldn't it?
Well, Dr. Sturgis, what do you think? Can Alice in Wonderland be Gothic, to put you on the spot?
Well, Lewis Carroll is quoted in Hangs a Man by Shirley Jackson. So it's in a work of dark academia, which is Gothic. So I think there's actually, you could make a really interesting flow chart here that could justify a whole lot of things.
Excellent.
and teacher at Christ Church in Oxford, so lots of dark academia links there.
Perfect.
Brilliant. I had no idea that you could read Alice in Wonderland in Gothic. That's fantastic. So I'm always curious about the kind of the genesis of these courses. Was this sort of designed to be a fun but useful and challenging course for first timers? Is this a good entry point into languages at Signum University, or was it sort of designed for a different purpose than that?
No, it's absolutely. It's kind of the introductory entry level to survey of Germanic philology. It gives you sort of a broad picture of everything that's in there. All the older Germanic languages we'll be dealing with at least a little bit, including some we'll do a little bit of Middle English, a little bit of Middle High German, a little bit of Middle Dutch even. So we're going to really try and get that broad foundation down, and also talk about what the concepts are. What Germanic languages are, how language reconstruction works, and the very foundational concepts that are really useful to apply to any of the other philology classes as well. And then it's also, actually, I should say, it's Philology 1. There will then be a second part to this, Germanic Philology 2 in the spring, what follows on from this, and that kind of explores more focused issues. This is a survey of the languages. That one will be kind of an exploration, particular issues of interest in a little bit more depth. And then between those two, you should have a really solid foundation in Germanic philology. So any specific, Germanic language you then go on to deal with, or think back to anyone that you've done, should then be sort of, hopefully, at least that's the idea, enriched and illuminated by this broader context that you've done. So
you're encouraging students to take both classes if they can, but they don't absolutely have to take the second part. But
you signed up for them independently. They're independent classes, but they were conceived of at the same time. And they were planned to be sort of two parts of a coherent whole. So do what you want, right? But I think if you do take them together, they're meant to build one into the other, so you would get a lot out of it. But they're also meant to stand alone and be. Again, this one is the survey class, so it's kind of a complete survey in its own right. So you can just take that and then do it.
And a really useful foundation for later language courses offered, in future terms. I'd see we've got Old Norse coming up in the summer, and you've taught Gothic before, and other Germanic languages. They come up pretty much every term.
And one thing I'd really say is that if you're interested in any one of these things, if you're interested in Beowulf, if you're interested in Norse sagas or anything like that, or Middle High German romance, like the Nibelungenlied or something like that, if you're interested in any one of those things, having at least a basic foundation in Germanic philology as a whole will enrich and illuminate each one of those traditions in its own right. So I would recommend it on that basis if you've got that sort of prior interest in things already.
Mm-hmm. And then a question just to check whether the second the one that's offered next term, if you take that course, do you have to have taken one this term? Ideally.
Well, that's a good question. I don't remember.
I think on the website, I don't think it says that it is, but I suppose ideally you would have done.
I think in practical terms, you could take two without necessarily having one, as long as you made sure you had the necessary background. I think it's one of those things that you would want to email me or Paul or Paul Peterson or
excellent.
Anyone else involved, just to be sure. But
well, that's good. It's worth taking in mind when looking at the choices there. But Germanic philology double bill sounds like the way to go for me. Thank you so much for telling us all about that. It sounds like such a fun and useful and interesting course. So let's move on to our final course, Beowulf through Tolkien, another exciting course to talk about. Professor Swain, what can you tell us about this course?
That straight off, it frightens me and excites me in equal measures, often alternating with each other depending on the minute that you're asking me. So this course is a wonderful course, I think, but it is not an introduction to Beowulf, and it is not an introduction to Tolkien. It is taking Tolkien's translation and commentary that were thankfully released eight years ago now already. Oh my God, I'm getting old.
Yeah.
8 years ago already, and reading through that translation, noticing his translation strategies, right? Some of the words that he uses. For example, he uses the word knight to translate. Well, that's a pretty deliberate choice on his part, and there was some criticism at the time that the book came out. But there's reasons why Tolkien is choosing that word, and what it means and connotations and those kinds of things. There's an extensive commentary. And as in most things with Tolkien, even when he's writing commentaries, he doesn't finish it because he gets so bogged down in the details, right, that he never actually finishes it in the class. So we're going to be reading that. We're going to be reading his commentary. We'll read Christopher Tolkien's commentary on, well, my father's notes say this, or they, trade that. There's some really good gems in there about how Tolkien changed his mind on things along the way. Recorded lectures are mostly by Tom Shippey, who is a wonderful and well-known Tolkien scholar, and there are some by our own Dr. Goering in that series as well. So it's really a really great class. The biggest problem is there's so much wonderful stuff to talk about that how do you fit that in a 1 hour preceptor session? So we'll do what we can and hope for the best.
And in a way, it's a luxury, if that's the right word, to be able to spend 12 weeks on one text, essentially,
Yes.
compared to other courses where we're moving around so much.
I'm with Takako in the chat. We should take something Beowulf related every semester.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great book to take on a desert island. You'll never get sick of it. So just looking down the schedule, maybe a dumb question from me, but when you're saying, we're reading lines in the Tolkien book, are we also reading the Old English?
Yeah, no, it's all entirely a translation except those
Okay.
parts where I will translate, right? So no,
Okay.
Old English
So
is necessary.
it's a really close reading, essentially.
Correct.
Yeah, and there is a lot to say about each line.
Or about things like dragons.
Yeah, dragons. Tell me more.
Well, of course,
What can you say about dragons?
there's the Beowulf dragon is one of the three big dragons in medieval literature, right? You would expect that there'd be a whole lot more dragons, but there aren't, right? So Beowulf and Fafnir and the Volsunga Saga, and now the third one is going to escape me because you asked, right? So we want to spend some time talking about that guy when we encounter that portion of the poem later in the semester, right? Because it's a fairly important story.
Yeah, and I agree. There should be more dragons in literature. It's surprising that there aren't. I remember in the classical myths and legends course, you talk about dragons in that as well. My ears always prick up when I hear the word dragon. Okay, another kind of broad question. What, generally, did Tolkien do a good job with this translation? Is this a good, if Tolkien hadn't done anything else, and obviously he did, would we say, hey, you should read Tolkien's translation of Beowulf because it's a good translation of Beowulf? Or is that kind of a difficult thing to assess?
Well, I'd like Nelson to answer that question. No, in my view, I think that yes, it is a very good translation, and especially for the time, right? I mean, yes, it came out in 2014, but Tolkien did it back in the 30s, right? So for thinking about Beowulf in English in the 30s, it's an outstanding translation in those contexts. But we have a wealth of riches, right, in the in-between time. But still, I think it's a translation worth reading. The one thing I wish that we had was a poetic translation by Tolkien, right? This translation is in prose, modern English prose, and I do wish that we had his treatment in poetry, but we don't. So at least at the moment, there might be something in those papers in Oxford or Marquette that somebody can edit at some point, but right now it's prose.
And I suppose Fall of Arthur is kind of closest, getting close to that. He says, not really knowing what he's talking about, but isn't Fall of Arthur kind of in a similar sort of style to Beowulf? It's the alliterative,
right? Yeah, the alliterative poetry, which of course in modern English is hard, much harder than in Old English to do alliterative poetry. But yes,
fantastic. Professor Goering, what are your thoughts on this as a translation?
Well, it's one of those. I mean, it's a very Tolkien was trying to do very specific things, which with the translation, right? He wanted to give it what he sort of, I think, considered kind of a dignity, which he has this sort of syntax that's maybe not always completely plain and straightforward. He uses these word choices, not just knight, right? There's some a lot of very interesting word choices. Knight is definitely a striking one, and things like that. That he's going for a very particular effect that I think is sort of this rich and dense and intricate. It's not poetry. It isn't a poetic translation, but it is also not. It's a prose translation, but it's not a prosaic translation.
Right.
It makes it harder to read, I think. It's a little bit, he's challenging you a little bit, but but that's also, I think, the way the poem is. It's a work of art. It's meant to be this intricate kind of thing. And so I think I think you can make criticisms of him, but I think you also say that given the sort of terms he set for himself, I think he's pretty successful.
Well, that sounds fantastic and really useful. Another really useful and interesting and fun and fascinating course. So thank you so much for telling us all about it. We've come to the end of our time. We're about an hour into this preview, and it is only a preview. The courses themselves begin next week. And if you want to find out more about any of these topics, you have to take the course. But you can do so as an auditor or as a credit student through the MA or the diploma. Do look into that on our website, and you too can learn about all these exciting things. Before we wrap up, I mean, we do like to traditionally ask each person, if you could only take one course, which one would you take? Which is always an impossible question, but it's always fascinating to know what people would take if they were a student themselves. So let's just quickly go around. Faith, if you could only take one course, which would it be?
Actually, if I could only take one of these courses, I would take the Introduction to Germanic Philology, because I feel that is my area of weakness as a scholar. I haven't had a lot of philology, and it's an area that I'd love to know more about.
Excellent. Very, very good. Amy, what about you? Oh, you unmuted yourself and then muted. There you go.
I would take the foundations course, actually, because that way I could sample a variety of different topics and also a variety of different lecturers and instructors. And I think that's a wonderful sampling there to be able to get a whole lot in one semester.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Nelson, how about you?
And there's a lot of very tempting ones. I probably have to say I'd go with the dark academia, particularly the thought of being able to hear from like R.F. Kuang and people like that, write as very current things that are coming out right now from these excellent authors. I think that'd be pretty amazing. Brilliant.
Thank you. Liam.
I think I would also probably have to go with Professor Sturgis's Dark Academia course. Not very often that you get a whole genre named after the field in which you work. But I would also just like to say, it sounds kind of funny, like having just completed a PhD, that I would want to take Professor Acker's Foundations class. Absolutely. This is genuine. I don't think you guys know how much, and they said it couldn't be done, right? To get all these things and have them be about fun texts that people actually want to talk about, well done. Yeah.
Brilliant. And Larry, what about you?
Well, I've taken a foundations course back in the day, and I teach Shakespeare in the Middle Ages in another university. And kind of Germanic philology is kind of what I do. Not as much as Dr. Goering, but it's kind of what I do. So that leaves me with dark academia. So that's where I would go.
Fantastic. I have no idea what I would pick. Faith, were you putting your hand up to say something?
I wanted to answer a comment that's in the chat box.
Yeah, please.
And that has to do with discussion auditors. I'll give you a moment or two to debate your answer a little more, Gabriel. And that is that a discussion auditor will have access to every lecture. If it's a recorded class, you'll get access to those lectures from the first day. If it's my new course or Professor Sturgis's, you'll have access to, you can come to the live lectures and you can type questions to us if you're able to attend the lectures, or you can watch them later and email us with questions after the fact. If you're a Premier auditor, which I think you can be for both my course and Professor Sturgis's, then you have access to the live lectures and to the live lectures after they are presented. So you can watch them live and interact with us during the lecture, or you can watch them later. And again, you would have the ability to email us sort of quickly. And I happen to know from having precepted some of Professor Sturgis's courses that she's great about taking questions from one lecture and answering them at the start of the next lecture. So if you couldn't make her lecture times, you could email her if you had watched the lecture, and she would probably address your question in the next class. I'll try to do that as much as I can as well. So there's Premier Auditor, where you can watch the live lectures. There's Discussion Auditor, where you can still watch the live lectures or engage with the recorded lectures, but you also get to come to the discussion sections, and that's for any of our 5 courses. So you would get to come to 1 or 2 hours of live discussion each week. If you happen to be a discussion auditor in my class, as well as taking another course, you'd be welcome to try to use my class techniques towards your classwork for the other class. Otherwise, you'd be using them to complete the coursework for my class exclusively if you were a for credit student. But you'll get a lot of interaction and also access to a course discussion board, extra readings that are posted on our Google Classrooms, and any other materials, all of the discussion auditors and the Premier auditors. So the difference is, if you're a discussion auditor, you get to have the discussions, and if you're a Premier or a regular auditor, you have just the course materials and the lectures. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, very, very well explained and full of question. Even if I sign up via Anytime Auditor for Beowulf 3 Tolkien, because it is a flex course, I could still access the discussions, the discussion board, but not the discussion sessions, like not the preceptor sessions.
Yes, I think all the Anytime auditors get shuffled into one Google Classroom.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't see, because each semester that a course resets. So the students who are taking the Shakespeare course this semester won't be able to see the discussions that the students had taking Shakespeare 6 years ago, or however, I think it was 6 years, wasn't it? It's been a long time. Maybe 5 years. So if you're taking a new course, you'll get a fresh discussion board. So I think all the Anytime auditors have a discussion board, but it won't be populated with other things, and it's sort of time dependent. You might be the only Anytime auditor, so you might not have anybody to talk to. You might just be typing into the void, which is a little sad, but
yeah. So the Anytime auditor is, you get access to all the lectures, and you teach yourself basically with the pre-recorded lectures. So it can be a great option. It's a particularly great option if you want to take a course that isn't offered again. You know, do bear that in mind. But it's really the discussion auditor option you want if you want to join in the discussion, and the credit options if you want to do the assignments. Okay, so Nelson, you say the Shakespeare course would be a close second for you. You love Shakespeare and medieval stuff, and it would be immense fun to spend a term exploring the overlap of that particular Venn diagram. I completely agree. And then I have to give my response very quickly. I'm going to say foundations, just because I love the Odyssey and I love the variety in that. But oh my gosh, I'm so torn. I could take all of these. If only I had a time turner like Hermione Granger, that would be ideal. But anyway, thank you so much for everyone attending in the audience. Thank you so much for all the questions. Thank you so much to our brilliant panel of amazing teachers for all your responses and answers. I'm so excited about the upcoming term. Do sign up for a course if you haven't done so already, and we will see you around. Thank you so much, everyone. Keep reading, be happy, and good luck. Bye-bye.